your fantasy league. These are the 4 guys I'm going to have on every single team because they're the 4 guys that nobody else is even paying any sort of attention. One of them people know and are paying a little bit of attention to. The other guys are sort of being ignored for whatever other reasons.
All right,
I'm
go through them one by one.
All right. The first one is Cooper Kupp. I think Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, I love him.
A lot of people are overlooking him because he had the ACL. They're a little concerned. I'm not concerned. I think the way modern medicine is, I think Cooper Kupp's going to be phenomenal. I think he's going to be awesome, and he's proven that he's going to be awesome in that offense.
Yeah, and there's no. Let just at the beginning of this list of 4 players, there's no player I hate. There's no player I won't take at the right price. This is all about value. This is about where you get them value wise, and I'm with you that Kupp is a good value in the 5th round. A lot of the time, I would take him in the 3rd.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing that I'm going to and I know none of the people that I'm drafting against are listening to this podcast. So I can give all of this phenomenal information away, but I'm focusing heavy on running back you're focusing heavy on running back. That's so brilliant. But I think there's been, especially last year, people were starting to, move away from going heavy running back. I mean, I'm really focusing heavy on running back in my first couple picks. And then I'm getting these guys, these wide receivers in later rounds. The next guy on my list is Jarvis Landry. I think that the acquisition of Odell Beckham Jr. is obviously great for the Cleveland Browns, but I think it's going to be even better for Jarvis Landry because I believe teams are going to be scheming more for Beckham than they are for Landry. And it's just going to open up a whole new avenue for Baker Mayfield in that offense.
So the thing I'll say about that is that's almost like the original crutch argument that I at ESPN started to write down all these lists of things. We would sit in that meeting where we'd come up with our group ranks, and that would be because you can argue just as easily what you just argued, that the attention paid to Beckham helps Landry. You can also argue, lots and lots of targets are going to go to Beckham. That means fewer targets for Landry. That's bad. So I would want you to have that reasoning because you like Landry as a player, less about it. I know that's what it's at the foundation of what you're saying. Landry in the past has been a really, really great slot receiver, and last year had to go down the field a little bit more, had weird hands. For somebody with some of the best hands in the league, had weird hands troubles last year. He had some really bad concentration drops. I'm a little higher on Landry than the market as well, especially in PPR.
The next guy might be a guy we're going to disagree with a little bit here, and that's Adam Humphries. I think he proved last year that he's a pretty good receiver, and I think he's an extra option now for Marcus Mariota, despite seeing Mariota struggle a little bit in the preseason. Well, he's free in drafts. You can just take him with your very last non-defense, non-kicker pick, so he's your 14th round pick. I can see how that works. See, again, now the argument people would knee-jerk make against Adam Humphries and anything Tennessee is, don't you realize, Jay? Don't be stupid. Tennessee's offense is going to be terrible. And my whole point is we're wrong a lot of the time about that kind of thing. To just completely rule out the possibility of a guy who has a very specific niche. He's a slot receiver who doesn't go down the field but can be a total target magnet. That guy in a good offense can be never probably a superstar, but like PPR wise can be a flex for sure. I'm not trying to say that Tennessee has an equal chance to be as great an offense as Kansas City, obviously. I just don't want to rule out the possibility of any upside at all. People just go, oh, Miami, Washington, Tennessee, they're going to suck. I don't want any players from you can't be drafting players from those teams. And that's just flat wrong. I mean, you can make the case Mariota, nobody expected that offense to be trash last year. They were supposed to be a pretty okay middle of the road kind of offense last year. He hurts his elbow week 1, misses games, is never the same the rest of the time. What if he comes back? Granted, Tennessee doesn't seem to want him, just like Tampa doesn't want Winston, but I can see this working out. All right. You've been too agreeable here, Chris. If you thought Adam Humphries was a free pickup, then this guy is also, and that's Cole Beasley. And again, right. They all have that same sort of, they're all a slot receiver in PPR leagues. I think they're target magnets. I think, especially from what we've seen in the preseason so far with Josh Allen developing a chemistry with Cole Beasley, a wide receiver he didn't have last season. I think Cole Beasley is going to be another great steal.
Could be. I'm probably more convinced that Humphries is a good player compared to Beasley. So if you were going to spend a 14th round pick, I would probably pick Humphreys before I pick Beasley. I'm not sure I necessarily would pick either, but you have a feeling, and that's fine. Once again, the market would be against you because how can you be expecting Bills' weapons to be good? Because that offense stinks. Don't you realize that? And I like that you're counter programming to that. And the larger point is none of the four guys that you brought up are going at a price that, well, not a price that I consider ridiculous, but I think anybody like looking at the market rationally would say, I think that there's at least a fair price, if not even a discount, at those four players you just mentioned. So you're not going to get any argument from me on any of them.
And by the way, while I love all four of those guys, and I'm planting my flag in that you will win your fantasy league with those four wide receivers, I'm not passing up opportunities on guys like DeAndre Hopkins, Julio Jones,
Sure.
Devontae Adams, Michael Thomas. If those guys are falling, I'm picking them up. For example, in the Scott Fish Bowl, Michael Thomas fell to me in the second round. I grabbed him.
Right. Yeah, I don't think you're sitting there saying my ideal team is Cooper Kupp at my wide receiver 1. Like that's probably nobody's ideal team, but the great thing is you don't have to take him as your wide receiver 1.
Right. Exactly. All right. Well, we don't have any bets.
That's okay. You never pay up anyway.
That's a good point. Good point. Chris, besides harrisfootball.com, where can people find you?
That's about it. I mean, everything's, if you search Harris Football, like social media, anything at Harris Football is me. Facebook and Twitter, and I even have an Instagram account that has like 1,000 followers. It's not, I mean, I'm take them. I love my Instagram followers, but I don't do a lot of Instagram work. So, I mean, YouTube, have you watched the YouTube show, by the way?
I watched it last year. I haven't kept up with it, but I see that you've got way more videos than you had even last year.
Yeah. We're talking August 29th, and I think in the 29 days so far of August, I think we've done 27 videos. I'm breaking down. I mean, so my shtick. My shtick is that I watch all the game film, every single game during the season. And that's what I do podcast 5 days a week, and that's a lot of what we talk about is what I saw on film, because I think that's a lot more reflective of what the people can do and how they're being used than looking at box scores. So the podcast is really big because of that. And then I decided, okay, well, but I can only describe it to you on the podcast. So on the YouTube show, I can actually show you plays. So that my face doesn't even appear on the YouTube show anymore. It's just us breaking down plays and talking about why we like players and why we don't like them. I think it's youtube.com/harrisfootball.
You should put like a little outline at least of your head while watching the film. Kind of like MS3K. Yeah, that'd be great. And be like, hey, look at this. Then have like a little puppet robot, say something stupid. Yeah.
Yeah. I got an Andrew Luck robot.
That'd be, if you could get Captain Andrew Luck on the show, that'd be a big coup for you.
Right.
Chris, as always, thanks so much for doing this. And I will find a way to bring you on during another point in the season than just the beginning of fantasy football season.
Anytime you want me, you just ask, but thanks for asking. It was really fun.
It's my pleasure now to bring in I believe he's been on this podcast before, and if he hasn't, shame on me. But it's TJ Rives from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Radio. We've known each other for a couple of years now, working in various forms. TJ, how are you?
I'm good, and you still put the bat signal up, and I respond. I mean, invite me once, and I decline. Shame on you. Invite me twice. Shame on me. I think you've invited me about 17 times. Here I am, and if you are like me, you're going over all your materials, trying to figure out who am I drafting, what position do I need, and I've got 3 drafts coming up right now, Jay. So I'm even myself, while you're trying to get information out of me, I'm trying to get information out of you and everybody else to figure out who I can have as that third receiver, who's the sleeper running back, who's the guy that you draft that everybody goes, who is that? I'm looking for those guys right now, my friend. Well,
I reached out. Well, there's a whole bunch of things. There's a bunch of ways of how we reached out to each other, bat signals, all sorts of, there were smoke signals involved, all sorts of.
The Pope, what color was the smoke?
Exactly.
In the Bucs case, it's pewter and red. Put the pewter and red out and I'm there. Yeah.
Exactly. But one of the reasons why I'm excited to talk to you is because obviously you are very connected to the Buccaneers, but you've also seen the Dolphins, and you're close enough to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Yeah. You probably know what's going on in Jacksonville too. So
you think someone in your audience is actually going to draft someone on the Dolphins in their fantasy league?
That was going to be my first question.
Yeah,
so I'm glad you brought it up. A few years ago, I once famously said, friends don't let friends draft Cleveland Browns. And I was right. Now, this year, it's the exact opposite. You probably want to draft every Cleveland Brown as possible. But are the Miami Dolphins that team? Is there a fantasy relevant player on the Miami Dolphins?
That's a great question. All right, so promise me, because I just saw the Browns at the time that we're talking right now. I saw the Browns in preseason game number 3, and I have a thought or two about having seen Baker Mayfield overthrow everybody. In fact, he may have very well overthrown Shaq and Yao Ming had they been on the field for a lot of that preseason game. But back to the Dolphins, what do? Point blank, I would not take a Miami Dolphin like in the first, depending on how long it takes you in your draft, in the first 2 hours of the draft. I don't know that I'm looking the way of Kenyon Drake at running back, Kenny Stills at wide receiver. God help us if you're having to look at Ryan Fitzpatrick or Josh Rosen at quarterback. And the real question is, and they may know this already, are the Dolphins going to get rid of Kenny Stills? I had him last year. He's a good, third wide receiver option on your team, good for depth when you have bye weeks, when you have injuries. But Miami may be getting rid of him, and your audience may be listening to this right now, and you already know they got rid of him. They may be releasing him or trading him to somewhere else because he's been outspoken. He's been protesting the national anthem. This is always good, Jay. Professional athletes can sometimes get away with this. Most of us in the workforce cannot criticize, much less blast the employer publicly, and probably still hang on to the job. And he was doing that with the owner, Stephen Ross. So I'm meandering a little bit here, but look, Miami has got deficiencies. The two guys that I would like to draft later in my draft are probably Kalen Ballage, the backup running back, second-year running back. He may see a lot of carries around the goal line. He may get a lot of those touchdowns on short yardage, goal-to-go situations, if Miami ever has any. And then beyond the wide receivers, I like their tight end, Mike Gesicki. He is a second-year tight end, very athletic. If you carry tight ends, if they're mandatory in your league, and you get going along and you need a late-round tight end for a second or third tight end for your league, just remember the name Mike Gesicki, because they're going to throw to him in the red zone. They're going to throw to him on third down. Those would be the Dolphins I would look at. Friends should not let friends draft the Dolphins, but those would be a couple I would look at.
That's an interesting one. There's been a lot of talk that there's no depth at tight end. I actually think it's the opposite. I think there's a lot of depth at tight end this year. There's a lot of names that when you get into that 6th, 7th round area, if you didn't hit on, one of the big 3 in Kittle or Kelsey, or who's the other one I'm forgetting? That guy.
Not going to include my Buccaneer guys? You're not going to include
well, we'll get to your Buccaneers guys.
We'll get to my Buccaneer guys in a couple of minutes, I guess. But, it's a lot. Remember for so many years you used to draft like Antonio Gates because he was such the go-to guy for Phillip Rivers for so many years. But it's become less and less on who are the stars. You might occasionally have one. Gronk is obviously retired, and I know a lot of people are bummed by that. I would wonder in a couple leagues that I'm in, one of them had a diehard Patriots fan, and it's like he would start getting his eye would start twitching when we were in the in-person draft. He would get the shakes because it's round 3 and he doesn't know if it's too early to draft Gronk yet every year. I don't know that there's a tight end that's worthy of being in the 2nd or the 3rd round or even the 4th round of your draft. But you start looking 5th round, 6th round. If you're in a 10-team, 12-team draft, you mentioned Kittle last year. He was a difference maker if you had him from the San Francisco 49ers. If he stays healthy, I'll go ahead and say it. O.J. Howard is a real difference maker in terms of a guy that can catch 40, 50, 60-yard touchdowns from Jameis Winston. So you do cast an eye on guys that can make big plays, and maybe it's somebody like those that we mentioned.
All right, you've taken me to the Bucs. I'm going right to the Bucs because the real question I have about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year, they were extremely fantasy relevant while not being really NFL relevant, if that makes a lot of sense.
Especially the first couple of games.
And honestly, that's the way